The evolution from espionage to civilian exploitation. Throughout the Cold War, intelligence agencies like the CIA, KGB, and M16 developed covert techniques to surveil, influence, or even destabilize individuals and organizations. Many of these strategies included psychological profiling, disinformation, infiltration, and blackmail. All of these techniques have since leaked into the public domain through declassified documents, pop culture, and online spycraft communities. In turn, we have modern bad actors, anywhere from people that are extremists to movements to cyber criminals. And these bad actors have repurposed these methods for private gain or for ideological warfare. The common examples include phishing and impersonation, so that's echoing Cold War counterintelligence techniques. Also, disinformation campaigns, and this is modeled on propaganda and psychological warfare manuals. Also, targeted defamation and rumor control. And this is reminiscent of COINTELPRO's community infiltration tactics. So, what was once statecraft has become crowdsourced psychological warfare in the digital era. So now let's look at the role that social media plays. Social media has transformed intelligence-style tactics into tools of mass participation. Organized online collectives can now surveil, manipulate, or mob target individuals at scale. These digital copycats adopt CIA-style tradecraft, not for national security, but they do it for revenge, ideology, or even entertainment. Common patterns include doxing, or publicly exposing private data to intimidate or silence others. Swarming, which is coordinated harassment campaigns using fake or anonymous accounts. Narrative warfare, which is spreading false narratives to destroy credibility or incite hostility. And psychological triggers, using rumors, emotional provocation, or even AI-generated media to destabilize a target's sense of safety. These actions are often decentralized and lacking a formal leader or structure, yet they're capable of producing real-world psychological and reputational damage. Unlike intelligence agencies, which historically acted for strategic or political goals, these modern imitators are driven more by personal motives. One would be ideology. Extremist groups, targeting individuals based on religion, gender, political stance, or social activism. Profit. Scammers and organized criminals exploiting fear, extortion, or blackmail. Revenge and social dominance. Local or online communities that are weaponizing surveillance and shaming tactics to control or silence individuals. And for entertainment, trolling, culture, and harassment for sport, fueled by being able to remain anonymous and have group reinforcement. This blend of motivations produces what experts call civilianized psychological warfare, the mimicry of intelligence operations by non-state actors. While it is difficult to document systematically, law enforcement and digital safety researchers have observed increasing overlap between cyberstalking, organized harassment, and intelligence mimicking methods. For one, targeting individuals, and victims have often reported feeling watched or manipulated across multiple platforms. Experiences that, while real, are typically just orchestrated by online groups or criminal rings using spyware, data leaks, or social media manipulation. Information laundering. Just as CIA propaganda operations once used foreign press to legitimize narratives, modern harassers use forums, sock puppet accounts, and AI tools to make disinformation appear organic. And group psychology. The anonymity and reinforcement loops of online spaces create the same mob psychology once engineered through psychological operations, or PSYOPs. There is real damage and psychological and social implications of this. Victims who perceive intelligence-level targeting are often responding to a hybrid threat: real harassment amplified by sophisticated mimicry of espionage methods. And this can produce hypervigilance and isolation, as victims struggle to distinguish between genuine surveillance and perception shaped by online manipulation. Distrust of authorities, since the tactics used mirror known intelligence behavior, making victims believe law enforcement is complicit. And this can also lead to a misdiagnosis or stigma, when psychological distress is dismissed rather than investigated as a product of real organized harassment. Understanding this overlap between criminal mimicry and intelligence mythos is crucial for effective intervention and support. In the digital age, the line between espionage and organized crime has blurred. These tech-savvy groups, ideological movements, and individual criminals now imitate CIA and intelligence methods to stalk, to intimidate, or to exploit others, often with devastating psychological impact. While some of these victims have interpreted these campaigns as government targeting, evidence increasingly points to civilian imitation of covert tactics, fueled by social media, open source spycraft knowledge, and the viral spread of psychological warfare techniques once limited to state agencies. This highlights a troubling reality: the democratization of manipulation, where anyone can act like an intelligence operative, and anyone can become their target. What can be said factually and responsibly is that the U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA, have lawful authorities to collect foreign intelligence and to collaborate with other agencies that have domestic jurisdiction. An example of these agencies would be FBI and DHS. When there is a threat to national security, or there is a threat suspected. However, the specific surveillance methods they use and the groups they monitor are classified, and it would be speculation to describe or guess at them. So we'll look at what is publicly known and widely documented about how groups that threaten U.S. interests, or U.S. citizens, might be monitored under legal frameworks. One method would be signals intelligence, and this is the interception and analysis of electronic communications. It's conducted primarily by the National Security Agency under strict oversight. The CIA may analyze foreign signals intelligence to identify overseas groups communicating with U.S.-based actors. And it's used for tracking terrorist networks, cybercriminal organizations, and foreign propaganda operations. 2 would be human intelligence, and this involves field officers or informants gathering information directly from human sources. The CIA's Directorate of Operations specializes in human intelligence abroad. In cases where a group operates internationally, for example, extremist organizations or transnational crime networks, the agency can use undercover operatives or recruited insiders to understand their methods and leadership. 3. Open source intelligence. Publicly available information. This publicly available information is analyzed for patterns or indicators of coordinated activity. Social media, online forums, video platforms, and news outlets are constantly monitored for signals of radicalization, recruitment, or disinformation. This is the least intrusive form of intelligence collection, but increasingly valuable for mapping influence networks and extremist propaganda. 4 would be cyber intelligence, and this focuses on detecting, infiltrating, or disrupting digital operations. It involves cooperation between the CIA, NSA, Cyber Command, and FBI Cyber Division. It can include tracing financial transactions, identifying bot networks, or monitoring foreign-controlled cyber operations. It is strictly regulated to prevent unlawful surveillance of U.S. citizens. 5. Financial and network analysis. This would be following the money, infrastructure, and logistics, which often reveals more than intercepting messages. So this type of surveillance often relies on the Treasury Department and international intelligence sharing agreements, not direct spying. 6. Partnership and interagency cooperation. So the CIA rarely works alone. Intelligence collection often happens through joint task forces that combine FBI, which is domestic law enforcement, NSA, which is signals and cyber intelligence, DHS, which is homeland security and extremist monitoring, and allied foreign intelligence agencies. Also, through these partnerships, the CIA can receive intelligence from other nations about international groups that threaten U.S. citizens or interests. Predictive and behavioral analysis. Modern intelligence increasingly uses AI and machine learning to detect behavioral patterns that suggest coordination, radicalization, or deception campaigns. These are tools that analyze large data sets, like communication patterns, digital footprints, and even transaction records, to predict emerging threats. The goal is early detection, not mass surveillance, so focusing on the threat indicators rather than individuals themselves. Under U.S. law, notably the National Security Act of 1947, and executive orders, the CIA cannot legally conduct domestic spying or target U.S. citizens for surveillance. When information about domestic threats is uncovered, it must be referred to the FBI or to the Department of Homeland Security for follow-up under judicial oversight. Groups that mimic or adapt intelligence-style tactics, whether it be extremist collectives, organized harassment networks, or cybercriminal rings, are likely monitored through a combination of digital forensics, foreign intelligence sharing, and behavioral analytics. But this framework is monitored and it's guided by legal frameworks, international cooperation, and technological evolution, not the cinematic notion of omnipresent surveillance. It is possible some of these groups are being quietly watched, but through systems far more sophisticated, far more regulated, and forward-looking than the tactics that these groups themselves are trying to imitate. It's possible for small or loosely organized domestic groups to remain undetected for some time, especially if they are disciplined, decentralized, and technologically savvy. But the likelihood of long-term invisibility is very low because the modern surveillance, digital forensics, and behavioral analytics make it extremely difficult to operate covertly in the information age, particularly if the group communicates electronically, transfers funds, or attempts to influence the public, or harm the public. Cold War era CIA tactics, like psychological manipulation, infiltration, coded communication, and blackmail, were very effective in an analog world. But in today's hyper-connected environment, those methods leave digital footprints everywhere. For example, psychological operations. Online disinformation campaigns or harassment networks leave traceable metadata. There's timing patterns and even linguistic markers. These linguistic markers can be linked to individuals or groups through forensic linguistics and AI pattern analysis. Infiltration and sabotage. Attempts to infiltrate organizations or online communities generate digital trails, IP logs, access histories, and message archives that can be reconstructed even after deletion. Encoded communications. So encryption can protect privacy, but metadata, so time, device, network origins, often reveals more than the messages and the content. Even supposedly secure apps are subject to correlation analysis. So while these imitators may feel that they are off the grid in a sense, the systems watching for anomalies are far more advanced and automated than anything Cold War operatives ever imagined. Several factors can delay detection. For instance, small size and decentralization. So the fewer people involved, obviously, means the fewer leaks, and the harder it is for authorities to detect pattern anomalies. The use of proxy technology, so VPNs, burner devices, and layered accounts, can obscure identities, though they're rarely permanently obscured. Ambiguous behavior. Many bad actors hide within legal gray zones, so online troll armies, ideological movements, or private chat groups, where intent is difficult to prove until harm occurs. And then one of the biggest reasons is information overload. Because agencies receive an enormous volume of data daily, these skilled operators can hide in the noise for a while, especially if their activities appear trivial or localized. All of these advantages fade over time. Human inconsistency, internal conflict, or even pride eventually expose these digital or behavioral tells. Intelligence and law enforcement agencies now rely less on direct monitoring and more on data correlation, connecting tiny, seemingly unrelated fragments of information. So what this means is that you don't need to be watched directly to be found. The system simply notices patterns around you. Behavioral analytics can predict affiliation or intent from activity clusters, and AI models can flag potential threat nodes based on shared metadata, language use, or movement patterns. So, while a domestic network or bad actor network might operate undetected for a short window, eventually the algorithms and the cross-agency data systems close in. What once required human suspicion now happens mathematically and almost invisibly. There's many bad actors who believe they are outsmarting the system by adopting intelligence-style tactics. But in doing so, they inadvertently draw attention, mimicking espionage behavior, secrecy, code phrases, false identities, patternless schedules are themselves markers in surveillance models that are trained to detect such anomalies. So, in layman's terms, acting like a spy makes you look like a spy. And in a world of predictive analytics, that's the last thing you want to look like. A group using Cold War CIA tactics can operate quietly for a time. They can exploit digital loopholes, and they can manipulate perception through fear or confusion. But long-term invisibility is almost impossible. Every communication, transaction, and movement generates data, and data never truly disappears. The tactics that once fooled analog systems now light up modern ones like flares in the dark. So, although some manage to stay hidden for a while, history and technology both demonstrate that the longer they play the ghost, the closer the light gets. Throughout history, covert operations have thrived in margins, the places between oversight and chaos. Like during the Cold War, psychological manipulation, coded communications, and infiltration defined a generation of intelligence work. These tactics were honed in a pre-digital era, when shadows and secrecy were enough to obscure intent. Today, however, groups that imitate these once effective methods find themselves wielding relics against a world that no longer plays by the same rules. So small domestic networks, extremist factions, and bad actor groups often believe that they can operate beyond the reach of law enforcement or intelligence scrutiny by adopting espionage-style discipline. So they will encrypt, they will compartmentalize, and manipulate narratives online, mistaking complexity for invisibility. Every action they take, every login, message, or transaction creates a digital residue. Modern forensic and analytic technologies can reconstruct these traces with remarkable precision, turning yesterday's invisibility into tomorrow's evidence. Basically, it's an outdated playbook. The tradecraft borrowed from declassified CIA manuals and Cold War folklore no longer applies to a world of constant connectivity. Classic tools, coded language, false identities, rumor campaigns, and psychological operations have migrated online, where they leave vast behavioral signatures. Ironically, the very paranoia that drives bad actors to conceal themselves often exposes them. Patterns of deception, erratic online behavior, and attempts at remaining anonymous are now recognizable flags in automated surveillance models. So the more they try to emulate spies, the more they resemble precisely what those systems are built to detect. To their credit, some of these groups remain undetected for short periods by exploiting the scale and ambiguity. So they hide in data noise, they disappear across platforms, and they communicate through mundane channels that seem harmless on the surface. Others exploit legal gray areas, operating under the guise of activism, satire, or social commentary, to delay scrutiny. But these advantages rarely last. The digital ecosystems are not static. Platforms evolve. Moderation algorithms learn. Patterns that no single actor intended to reveal. Our modern surveillance no longer depends on human observation. It functions through algorithmic correlation, connecting subtle fragments of data across time and systems. Behavior, location, device activity, and even the linguistic style can identify individuals long after they've vanished from view. The new intelligence paradigm doesn't chase its targets. It waits for them to reveal themselves in the patterns they can't avoid creating. For groups operating under the illusion of secrecy, the realization often comes too late, and when the net has already closed. Those who imitate the CIA's historical methods do so because they believe that they're mastering power. In reality, they are only reenacting an old performance under new surveillance lights. Their tactics are studied, their behaviors are predictable, and their sense of control is only an illusion. The intelligence community that they imagine they are imitating or evading has long since moved on towards tools and frameworks that render old tradecraft obsolete. It's not that they are invisible, it's that they're no longer interesting until they become useful as examples of failure. Modern surveillance has transformed invisibility from a skill into a myth. Every interaction, every digital echo, writes itself into a system that remembers. And while bad actors continue to play with the borrowed ghosts of the past, the real players, those who understand the evolution of information power, have already left the room. The illusion of control remains comforting, right up until the moment the mirror turns around. These bad actors who borrow old intelligence tricks believe that they've mastered the art of control, weaving their digital webs, manipulating narratives, and weaponizing fear as though they've uncovered a lost secret. But in truth, they're only reanimating the ghosts of history. They're replaying tactics that once worked in a slower, more gullible world. The systems they try to mimic have already evolved far beyond their comprehension. The real architects of modern intelligence no longer play with whispers and shadows. They play with patterns and probabilities. Their eyes are invisible. Their reach is mathematical, and their patience is inhuman. While the imitators believe they are hunters, the truth is quieter and colder. They are chasing echoes of an old game, unaware that the board has already shifted beneath them. The moves that matter have already been made. The real players, they are watching the watchers, 3 moves ahead. This is a work of research, analysis, and interpretive commentary. It draws from publicly available information, declassified historical materials, and social observations to explore the evolution of intelligence tactics and their influence on modern criminal and extremist behavior. It does not assert or imply insider knowledge of classified operations, nor does it claim that specific individuals or organizations are presently under investigation by the CIA or any government agency. All references to intelligence practices, surveillance methods, or agency activities are based on documented and historical sources, also informed speculation within lawful academic limits. The purpose of this video is to educate and examine patterns of adaptation, not to promote conspiracy theories or unfounded accusations. Any resemblance between discussed scenarios and real persons or events should be understood as coincidental or generalized illustration. Thanks for watching. See you next time.